Welcome to the introduction to the iPad Storybook Page Plugin. I'm going to tell you real quick about what the plugin can do, how it works, and how simple it is to set up. So basically the iPad Storybook Page Plugin is a plugin that allows you to create individual storybook pages, and you can put these pages together to make a complete storybook. There's other uses that you can do for it, but we'll get to those into a different video. So basically it's a storybook page has 4 buttons listed here. So the next page button, previous page button, a menu button, and then an interactive button. That interactive button is going to let you use a sound effect, and you can put a hotspot on the page somehow. So let's take a look at how this is set up. In this control panel here, I've got a demo app that just has a simple home screen menu and then 2 pages to my storybook. The home screen menu is just going to lead me to page 1, page 1 is going to lead me to page 2, and so on. So let's look at the setup for one of our storybook pages. Now we've broken this down into a couple easy steps. The general storybook properties, the properties for the next button, properties for the previous button, properties for the menu button, and then the properties for the interactive button. So let's look at how easy this is to set up. Under the general storybook properties, only 2 things to set up. One is to enable the swipe gestures. So either you can set it so that people can swipe through the storybook, or you can disable that so they're forced to use the buttons. The only other thing is the actual page image, and that's going to be the background image, separate from the background image of the whole screen, but it's going to be the overall picture for your storybook. Now this is going to be set up for an iPad device, so you want to use 1024 by 800 pixels, and then make sure that you use the correct PPI density for whatever devices that you're using for, whether it's iPad, iPad mini, or the Retina display iPad. So 2 simple things to set up there. Give it a picture and enable swipe or not. We look at the properties for the next button. One thing we can set up is what the actual button looks like. So we're going to give it a graphic file for that. We can set the button width and the button height in the control panel, so we can make it any size we want. Generally, I would suggest that you make the button in Photoshop first and then use the properties from there for the width and the height. Other than that, we're going to set the X and Y coordinates for where we want this button to show up. So it's not like a button menu where it's going to just kind of pop up where it wants to. We're going to give it exact location of where it's going to be. And then we're going to tell it the next page nickname of what the page is going to load. So we set up what picture it is, how big that graphic file is, where it's going to be on our page, and then the page that it's going to link to when we click on it. Other than that, just the transition type that we can select from any of our normal transition types. The curl looks best on a storybook. And that's going to be it. I'm going to have a separate video to show you guys how to find these X and Y coordinates if you're not familiar with how to find those, and it's a lot easier than what it might seem. So if we look at the previous button properties, same thing basically. The previous button picture file, the height and width for it, and then the X and Y coordinates for that button also. You'll notice that we don't have a screen to go back to because the previous button is just going to go back to the screen that called it. So for example, if I was on page 2 and I hit the previous button, it knows automatically to go to page 1. Pretty simple. Also, I'll show you that we can set up all of this information in our global theme, so that if you were planning to use the same next button and previous button for every single one of the pages of your app, which is quite possible, if you always use the same exact buttons in the same location for those buttons, you can set it up once in your global theme, and then you won't have to put these properties in for each individual page. That'll save you a lot of time if you have, let's say, a 40-page storybook. Next one is the menu screen properties, or it's actually the menu button properties. The first thing you set is what screen you want it to go to when you click on it. So it's just a simple button again that's going to lead to a screen. What the transition type is to go from the page that you're on to that screen. And then all the rest of the normal button properties. What the button picture is, the height and the width, and then the X and Y coordinates. I'm going to show you a demonstration of this in a minute, and you'll see how all these buttons line out. The next one is interactive button. Now this is going to give us the opportunity to put a hotspot somewhere on the page that we can make a sound effect play from. So you could either have an interactive sound effect like are in a lot of storybooks for kids, or you could make a read to me button and actually have an audio file on there of, let's say, the narration of the book itself, so that you can have the child perhaps read the story on the page, and then you can click on the read with me button and it'll have the dictation on it as well. So you can use that however you want. Very simple to set up. You give it a graphic file. In this case I used an invisible file, which is just a completely transparent PNG file, so that we can actually put a button on there, but it's invisible. Give it a height and width, and then an X and Y coordinate. And again, I'm going to show you in a separate movie how to get all these information nice and easy from Photoshop or different programs. And then the MP3 file for what we want it to play. I'm going to show again in another video how to load these MP3 files into your Xcode project and get them working nice and easy. So that's basically it. Let's take a look at a demonstration app real quick. Let me show you that this is the main menu that I set up, and I put just one simple link on there, read story. So when I click on that, it's going to go to my page 1. Now in my page 1 properties I had 4 buttons, each with their own location, each with their own graphic image. You can see here I've got my next button, my previous button, my menu button, and then that invisible button for the interaction is actually right here, and you can't see it. So remember, we can set the transition type for the next page. I set it to curl, and then previous page brings us right back. Since this was page 1, we could actually hide this previous page if it was a page 1 and force the users to use the menu, or we can actually use the previous page, which brings us back in this case to the main menu. Now let's say I'm drilled into my story somewhere and I've got this menu button. This will go to any screen that we tell it to. In this case I just told it to go back to the main menu, and you see I've got a nice transition to get back there. And then if I use the back button, I'm going to go right back to the page that I was at, and this in fact is page 2. If I was to go from there and hit the read story again, then it would of course link me to that page 1 again. So let's look at the interactive buttons, the hidden buttons. Right here is going to be where I've placed the invisible button on this page, and I've got just a simple buzz.mp3 file, and it just buzzes. You might not have heard that because it was in my earphones and not in your microphone, but take my word for it, it buzzed. And then on this page here I put the hotspot right in this area. So that's basically it. Very simple to set up. You can take and go from this project, add as many screens as you want. Very simple to make the artwork. Just a simple 1024 by 800 picture file that you can create in Photoshop. I would suggest doing all of your, if you're going to put words on the screen, do it all in Photoshop, get everything exactly how you want it. Then all you have to do is just drop it right into your project. Thank you very much for watching this introduction to the plugin, and let me know if you have any questions.